We've arrived at the last episode of our series covering the American Revolution. It's me. Let's get into it. The year is 1776. The American colonies have declared independence from Great Britain, and they have launched a war to win that independence. However, despite some minor early victories, the Americans have not defeated the British. Instead, their actions have enraged the British government and increased their resolve to put down this colonial rebellion. And as we begin this final episode, the British are massing their forces in New York. British commanders know that New York is a key prize in this war. Whoever controls New York controls the economic and commercial center of the colonies. It is also perfectly situated to project force onto the other colonies. In particular, if the British can control New York, they can threaten Philadelphia, the temporary capital of the United States and home to many printers who have been producing arms and ammunition for the Patriots. Furthermore, the Hudson River, which flows north from New York to Lake Champlain, opens up a possible line of communication between Canada and New York. If the British can conquer Canada, they can throw an additional 30,000 to 40,000 troops into the fight and put an end to this colonial rebellion. Therefore, the British have sent nearly 40,000 troops and 200 ships to seize New York and begin communications with Canada. Faced with this coming storm, the Americans know they cannot win a direct confrontation with the British. Therefore, they must use their knowledge of the terrain to try to harass the British enough that they will not be able to supply their armies. In August of 1776, as the British advanced, the Americans retreated through New York and New Jersey. While this may seem like a sign of weakness, it is actually a brilliant military move. You see, much of New Jersey is nothing more than a swamp. Therefore, it is impassable to all but the most intrepid traveler. This gives the Americans plenty of time to fortify their positions along the Delaware River in Pennsylvania and the Hudson River in New York. While the British do manage to take New York City, the British commander, General William Howe, finds that his army is unable to advance further. See, the British have powerful armies and navies, but they are not equipped to forage for food and supplies. That had to be done by civilian contractors. And those contractors simply did not foresee that the war would drag on for so long. Therefore, the British are forced to remain in New York City. They have seized the city, but they are unable to advance further. While the British are stuck in New York, the American commander, General George Washington, decides to strike a blow that will shake the entire nation. You see, prior to the war, most Americans considered themselves loyal subjects of the king. Only a relative handful had supported the radical call for independence. However, since the Declaration, the conflict has caused a hardening of hearts and minds. Now, everywhere, people are choosing sides, and the American cause has been given a huge boost by the arrival of foreign volunteers. Seeing these foreign soldiers fight alongside Americans boosts American morale. But it also serves to demonstrate to any waverers that this is a war against the greatest power in the world, and that the Americans intend to win. As the British sit in New York, Washington prepares his counterattack. On December 26, 1776, he launches a surprise attack on the garrison of British soldiers occupying Trenton, New Jersey. Due to low morale, bad weather, and a lack of supplies, the British are caught completely off guard. The result is humiliating for the British. Nearly 1,000 British soldiers are taken prisoner with only a single American killed in the action. The news of the victory spreads like wildfire. People who had been wavering in their support for the revolution are won over by the bravery of the Continental Army, and Washington's reputation is made. His prestige in the eyes of the American people skyrockets. Even those who had opposed him in the past now rush to join his standard. However, not everyone is so happy about the victory. In fact, the British are furious. The British Commander-in-Chief, Lord Stanley, is recalled to London to explain how his forces could have been so humiliated by a ragtag bunch of colonial militia. In truth, the British are shocked by the defense of the colonies. They had expected little resistance, and so had sent only a token force to put down the rebellion. The British were wrong. It underestimated the colonies. And now, to prevent another humiliation, they are sending even more troops to crush Washington and the Continental Army. Meanwhile, the British in North America are undergoing a change in leadership. The experienced and capable generals have all been removed from command due to the debacle in Trenton. In their place is placed General Sir Henry Clinton, a man whose talents lie in civil administration rather than military matters. Clinton believes that the best way to win the war is to focus on the southern colonies. There he believed that large numbers of loyalists would welcome the British and provide them with supplies and manpower. Therefore, in 1777, Clinton leaves New York and heads south. There he seizes Charleston, South Carolina, and establishes a base of operations for the British in the South. Meanwhile, General Washington is facing another crisis. His term as commander of the Continental Army has now expired, and Congress has failed to renew it. Again, Washington loves his country and wants nothing more than to secure its independence. But the country refuses to pay him. He has spent his own money to outfit his troops and travel to military campaigns. Now he is unsure if he should continue to serve the nation. Seeing his commander demoralized and on the verge of resigning, Congress acts. They grant him a new commission and a generous salary, but they also tell him that he must win a major victory or resign immediately. Washington realizes that they are giving him one last chance to save the revolution, and so he prepares to deliver a victory. Now, you might be wondering, why haven't we mentioned France yet? Well, it's because until this point, France has remained neutral in the conflict. However, France has been secretly supplying the Americans with weapons and ammunition for some time. Furthermore, the French have been eagerly watching the progress of the war. They have no interest in seeing a stable and prosperous United States emerge in North America. Therefore, they want to see the British defeated before committing themselves to the conflict. Washington has provided them with the victory they need. At this point, British attention is focused on the South. Therefore, Washington plans to strike a decisive blow in the North. He marches his army to the banks of the Hudson River and begins fortifying the heights overlooking the river. Meanwhile, the British are planning their own campaign. General John Burgoyne intends to seize the Hudson River and cut off the colonies from the north. We will then link up with General St. Leger advancing from Lake Ontario and General Barry St. Clair coming down from Canada. Once the Hudson is secured, Clinton will send reinforcements to Burgoyne, who will then be able to march south and crush Washington's army. This plan is extremely well thought out and will very likely succeed if Washington is not able to stop it. Therefore, in September of 1777, Washington does something that at first appears to be utterly insane. He sends a detachment of his army to intercept Burgoyne's advance. Of course, Washington is not really trying to capture Burgoyne's entire force. Instead, he is sending General Horatio Gates and a force of around 8,000 men to Saratoga. There, they can block Burgoyne's path and prevent him from receiving reinforcements. Despite being outnumbered, Gates' forces are able to stop the British advance. After a series of smaller engagements, the British are finally forced into a battle at Saratoga. The battle lasts for 2 days, but in the end, the British are forced to surrender their entire force. The Americans have won their first major victory. The news of the victory reaches Paris and the French immediately jump into action. On February 6, 1778, France formally enters the war on the side of the Americans. Suddenly, the balance of power has shifted. French Navy is now superior to the British in the Western Seas, and France provides the Americans with much-needed funding and weapons. With French aid, the Americans will be able to increase the size of their army and win the war. But this moment is still in the future. For now, the French are still cloaked in secrecy. And General Washington has won his reprieve from Congress, but he has not won the war. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our series covering the American Revolution. I hope you enjoyed this series as much as I enjoyed researching and writing it. In my opinion, the American Revolution is one of the most important events in world history. Not only did it create the United States of America, but it also showed that